Hey guys, this week is going to be a little bit different. We actually want to share with you a podcast that we did recently where we were interviewed by Justin Hansen and Chris Moffat of White Knight Pest Control. And so we're going to share that interview, that conversation with you in just a second. But first, I want to introduce you to Mary and Jonathan. I took Jonathan and Mary sailing in the Sea of Cortez, Mexico a few weeks ago and had a conversation with them. One was on the boat, and I'm going to share that with you at the top of our conversation today. And then I'm going to share a snippet with you from when we got back to the dock after the trip was over with you at the very end. So listen for those bookends and a little bit of sailing at the ends, and then a conversation with our new friends over at White Knight right in the middle there. So tune in and enjoy. All right, you two hooligans. So we're heading back to the marina. What have been some highlights from the trip for you guys?
All of it.
Learning how to sail.
Yeah. And sailing in different conditions. So we sailed in like 24 knots of wind.
Yeah.
We sailed with a light breeze, downwind. And we sailed like with 10, 12 knots of wind. We learned how to tack back and forth, how to hoist the main and the jib. It was awesome. That part was awesome.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I also love just being on the water, being able to swim and snorkel and kayak, all that stuff.
Yeah, I was actually impressed how many fish we saw at some of those snorkeling sites. There were a lot of beautiful fish.
I think overall, it's a great mix of adventure and peace and times for stillness. And it's been like really relaxing, not too structured, but we can learn stuff when we want to. It's been fun. It's just a beautiful place too.
It's not terrible, is it?
And great people.
Yeah.
Everyone on board has been so cool and nice to get to know and hang out with. And yeah.
I've never slept on a boat before, so that was fun to sleep at anchor.
Yeah.
And experience that.
All the variety.
Yeah. Some of the anchorages were flat, and others there's a little bit of a roll. That was fun.
That was a long answer for one question.
No, that's good. One other question, and then I'll teach you how to tie bowling. If somebody is thinking about coming on one of these trips, what would you say to them?
Just do it.
Do it.
So glad we did it. We were waffling back and forth, but if I were to go back and talk to us a month ago, I'd say, just do it. Don't wait. Do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Hey, thanks guys. Appreciate that.
For sure.
My name is Justin, and I am here with my magnificent host, Chris Moffat, and we both work for White Knight Pest Control. We just finished an awesome podcast with Emily and Eric Orton, and there's a ton of things that stand out about this. One of them is that they faced their fear and they went sailing as a family of 7 for a year. And then when they got back, you might think that their stretching opportunities are over, but then they went and sold door to door for it ended up being 3 years. They had a ton of great insights, and I think that everyone will really enjoy it about how to lead in your fear and how to continue pushing forward.
So, well, I'll give you the very brief version, Moffat. Basically, Emily and I got married young. We were 21, and we had our oldest when we were 23. We have 5 kids. And basically, I studied music in school. I worked in the theater industry. We moved to New York City, and I was managing Broadway shows and tours for a little bit over a decade. And that's where we raised our family in New York City. 5 kids, like I said, in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment that we still have.
It feels like a mansion.
And we're there not very often these days. I was producing a show. I was working on Wicked, which most people probably know. My big shows that I worked on were Les Miserables, Phantom of the Opera, Miss Saigon, and Wicked, and lots of other smaller shows. But I quit my job on Wicked to do my own thing, raised all the money, and hired everybody, and it was pretty exciting. And anyway, we we opened this show the same day that Emily was giving birth to our son, Eli.
Fortunately, he came the next day.
He came the next day. Anyway, long story short, that show, it was a beautiful show, but financially and marketing-wise, it kind of exploded and was a complete financial failure, which was pretty devastating and confusing. And I kind of just tucked my tail between my legs and left the theater industry, not sure what I wanted to do next in life, and was working this temp job downtown, Lower Manhattan, and came across a sailing school that was right downstairs, and basically just kind of watched it happen and kind of fell in love with it from afar, but felt very distant from it because sailing felt like it was for successful people, wealthy people, you know, bankers and hedge fund managers and stuff like that. And I had a temp job at night. That's why I was there. And so it was kind of like peeking through like putting my nose up against the glass of a candy store. Yeah. And anyway, Emily really encouraged me, and that's where I went in and just asked them how sailing worked, and that was the beginning. I didn't know anything about sailing before then, and I guess I'll just give you the quick overview, and then we can double back and drill down on anything that you want. But we started taking 101 sailing lessons there, and fast forward, I guess it was about 6 years after that, we bought a fixer-upper sailboat in the Caribbean with our 5 kids. We just flew down, sight unseen, moved aboard this boat, and spent the next year or so sailing it back to Manhattan. Had an amazing, incredible experience. In between there, I think, you know, I got to do a lot of, I still did theater and some fun projects and won some cool awards for stuff, but was not doing theater full time. But we got back to New York.
Yeah, he has an Emmy award.
Oh, really? Wow. That's amazing.
He has a couple other awards too, but
ones you would never have heard of.
Yeah, the Cine and that.
But
anyway,
the one that people know is the Emmy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was anyway, and then we came home from that, and it was kind of like, wow, we just did that, and if we did that, what else could we do? And just started changing up a lot of things in our lives. That's when I went into 100% commission, I guess direct sales. And did that for a few years, and then
killed at it.
Yeah,
really?
I'm telling you guys, like he had never seen himself as a sailor, and then when we went sailing, he was like, "Oh, I guess I can be different than I thought." And he also was like, "Oh, you know, I'm 40, and this is just your body just catches up with you this way, and I can just anticipate getting chubby from here on out." But then on boat, he lost all this weight and was like, "Oh, maybe that's not required, and maybe I can do something about it." And so he got really fit and has stayed that way ever since. And same thing with sales. He was like, "Oh, I'm not a salesman." I was like, "Did you raise like over $1 million to put this production together, but you don't like consider yourself to be a salesman?" And we got back, and he was like, "I don't know, but I could see myself in a new way." And he went into solar sales, and like they had him open. How many offices did they have you open? Like two, like
it was 3.
Three, yeah. It was like 3 offices, and like he was in their top 3 salespeople, and he was just crushing it. He has an amazing follow up, and he's just really good with people, and he knew the product really well. You know, he dialed his systems in and stayed really consistent. And one of the things he told me,
I started with Vivint Solar to answer your question.
Yeah, I started with Vivint Solar, and they have an amazing training program also, and we have some great managers that we stay in touch with today. But I saw him do all of that, and so I'll go back like to my story. I got a degree in education, teaching English and teaching Spanish, and I taught middle school for a little while, but then we started our family. And after our oldest were in school for a few years, not to go into the long version, but just we realized that for us, best choice for our family was going to be homeschooling, and that was pretty intimidating to me. But we went for it, and it turned out great. And you know, I was really scared of deep water, so living on a sailboat was a big jump for me, and I had to push back on my fears. And Eric was like, "You don't have to get in the water, you can just stay on the boat." But at a certain point, you're like, that's actually a little ridiculous, right? Like for day sailing maybe, but living on a boat, that doesn't really fit. So we were taking a class in the British Virgin Islands, and
the instructor every day would invite people to go snorkeling, and I always just sat on the boat by myself. And finally I was like, this doesn't even make sense. Like, again, that question of like, who am I and who do I want to be? And I just decided to be brave for a few minutes, and turned out that snorkeling was one of my favorite things. I love the water. I'm now scuba certified, and I'm a beginner surfer, and it just opened up the world. But it also really helped me push back on fear and be like, wait, what are maybe some other favorite things that are on the other side of my fears? So fast forward, as you know, we come through that journey with all kinds of confidence. You know, by the time we get to the end, we're like, wow, we have new skills. We did what we said we were going to do, and we trust that we can figure things out. So what else are we going to do? And I saw Eric go through this sales job, and he was like, if there was any fear left in me after the sailing trip, doing door-to-door sales has burnt it out of me. When you can go knock on someone's door and interrupt them in the middle of their life and be like, have I got a deal for you? You know,
Right.
then, you know, and when you aren't afraid about money because you're like, I can go shake the money tree whenever I want. Like, that burns a lot of fear out of you. I think particularly as a provider, which Eric's always been our main breadwinner, but I was just so impressed, and he found ways to include the whole family. And sometimes I would actually go out knocking with him, like on his birthday, because I really admire sales, and I think it's really cool and a noble profession. You know, when you're honest about it, then it's pretty great. And so we had a lot of fun doing that. And after he, you know, did really well at that, we ended up taking a few years where we just got really creative, and we're slow traveling the world with our kids, doing house sitting and farm sitting. And we went to, like, I think we ended up going like over 20 countries, and just having an amazing experience until COVID shut us down. But during COVID, solar sales was still considered a, what do they call it? Essential.
Oh,
Essential. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were kind of doing our thing. We had started, we were like, oh my gosh, we know about uncertainty. We should start a company and teach what we know about embracing uncertainty and like pivoting, because this is how we've been living for the last many years. And we have some we have some tools, and we also have some mindset strategies. Like, we know how to do this. So we started that, but we also realized that it wasn't really like peak time for public speaking. Nobody was gathering. And we did it. The long story short of it is that we all decided that we wanted to sell solar. And by all of us, I mean, I wanted to do it. And our two oldest daughters, who one had graduated from college and one was in college, were like, we want to do it. And we got together with one of Eric's old managers, and he was like, you guys could totally do it. And we're like, let's do it. So then he said, well, if you guys are doing it, I'll come along. If it's a whole family thing, I want to be with the family. So we started doing solar. And again, and this time we actually went to San Diego, and we're doing it there. And it was good. It was so true. It was so true about like burning out the fear and being able to talk to people and learning about yourself. And like, it's a real self-development program.
Yeah.
So I never got good at closing, but I learned that I'm really good at rapport. And I think it helped me be more calm when things come up and you find out last minute that it's not going the way you thought, but now you're going to talk to your prospect in like 1 minute. Like, time for some improv. Great news. That's actually kind of a long story of my version. But
when do you stick to a plan versus when should you deviate from your plan?
Mm-hmm.
And I know both of you talked a little bit about that in your book. You had the whole year planned out, but I mean, just life in general, you guys were kind of just on that typical plan, but since sailing, it sounds like you guys are broken apart typical, and you guys are blazing your own trail. So if we could like dive into that topic and maybe try to focus it around either leading yourself or leading those around you.
It's actually a pretty thorny question, and it's a really important question, because you're bringing up all kinds of things like when do you just kind of push through with grit and tenacity and determination, which sometimes serves you really, really well, and that's what you need to do. You just need to stick with something. And then sometimes you need to say, okay, well, what am I learning here, and how do I adapt and be flexible? And, you know, and I guess just to go right to the sailing metaphors, you know, so much of our lives, we don't control the elements. We don't control the wind or the seas or all kinds of external factors, but when we're navigating, and I'll use the term navigator maybe the way you would use the term leader, because I feel like a navigator is somebody who knows where they want to go and is constantly adjusting to get there, because there's so much in our lives that we don't control. And so I think there's just, do I just stay the course, or am I gonna tack here to get to where I really want to go? And so I think it's a really excellent question. It's a tough one, and I don't always have the answer. We're going through some of this stuff right now, but Emily, it looks like you have something you want to say? Or?
Oh yeah, I think it's awesome. Thanks for asking this question. No one's asked us to talk about this before, and we do have a lot of thoughts on this. And the first thing I appreciate about it is that you're assuming there is a plan. And so many people do not have a plan, and we'd love to start with figuring out what it is that you really, really want, not what your spouse wants, not what your boss wants, not what your parents or in-laws or your whatever groups you're a part of. But when you figure out what you actually want, then you're able to come to the table honestly, share all your cards, and say like, hey, how can we work together on this? So it was really helpful in our case, for example, when Eric let me know that he wanted to live on a sailboat. If he had been considering what I might want, he never would have mentioned it, because he knew I had a truly deep fear of deep water, and it would have felt like a non-starter. But he was able to say what he wanted and why those things were important to him, and a lot of his why matched with mine, like about creating memories together as a family, strengthening our relationships, learning new things. Like a lot of those are really high on my list. My vehicle wouldn't have primarily been a sailboat, but we were able to start from there and work together, because he was actually honest about what he wanted. So I love the idea of having a plan, and it presupposes that you know what direction you want to go. And then I think maybe just to kind of lay out this conversation about how do you know when to stick to a plan and when not, Eric has a really great story about trusting your compass.
So, we were newly on our sailboat. We'd been living aboard for maybe 2 or 3 months at this point. And we'd made friends with a couple of other families, and we were sailing together. We'd gone out to a few islands, and we were now heading to the next island. And we all sort of woke up and got going at our own schedule, and we were the first ones off and running. And we had kind of the least technically savvy boat. We didn't have a GPS plotter or anything like that. We were just navigating using an iPad. And all of us had autopilots, which is basically you push a button and the boat will stay on that specific compass bearing no matter what. Like you could be running into a rock and it won't change, but you just set the compass, you set the autopilot and you go. And so we're sailing from an island called Saba back to an island called St. Martin, where we were going to get some work done on our boat. And I didn't have the chart plotter there's like a vector thing. It's like a line that goes out in the front of your boat on this screen that shows where you're going basically in relationship to the ocean and the islands. And so I'm just I'm eyeballing it. And from what my eyeball says, it looks like we're gonna run into the point of the island that we wanted to go around. And so the other boats have kind of caught up with us, but they're behind us at this point. But I adjust my autopilot a few degrees west so that we'll go around the point rather than straight into it. And the other boats do not adjust their compasses. They just keep going on the same bearing that we were all on before. And, these things play out over time. Several hours later, and as the sun is setting, we end up being the last one into the anchorage that night. The other boats are already anchored. I think they'd already made and eaten dinner by the time we got there, and and so I had just adjusted our boat a few degrees because anyway. And so my buddy John, he's one.
We had to adjust back.
Yeah, we had to kind of like we went way out further into the ocean than we needed to, and we just had to make a long adjustment all the way back into into the harbor. And I was talking with John over dinner, and he's like, yeah, I noticed you changed course. What happened out there? And I was like, well, it looked like we were going to run into the rocks. And he's like, oh, yeah, it's kind of an optical illusion. He said, you just really got to learn to trust your compass. And that was the first time trust your compass is not a new phrase, but that's the first time I'd heard it. And the way that it landed with me was that, it's easy to misperceive a situation. It's easy to get kind of spooked, I guess, and get scared and kind of fall off. We call it falling off the wind, but just like basically kind of like shying away from the destination that we're trying to get to. And we really just need to, when we set a course and we've done our research and we feel good about it, we just got to stay strong and trust it and go for it. And I'll qualify this with one thing, which is that sometimes stuff genuinely comes up. If something, if I'd been holding my course and then I noticed that there's a shipping container floating in the water right in front of me, I'm not going to just trust my compass. I'm actually going to go around it. I'm not going to smash into something. And so it's a lot of just staying strong, being determined, and then knowing when to be flexible and when to adapt, because there's a really good case for both together.
And I would say something that I love this like literal example of it, because you checked it on the map first.
Yeah.
And then with your eyeballs, you were like, no, it doesn't look good. It happens so often. And this is the weirdest thing that we've discovered about like pursuing a goal, especially like a big, audacious goal, maybe something you would even call a dream, is that the closer you get to it, the more scared you seem to get. So once you, because I don't know what comes up, whether it's self-sabotage or what else, but it just seems like the closer you get to the thing you really want, the more resistance you will experience. And so when you know that the resistance is the natural part of getting close to what you want most, you can say, oh, this is just the resistance, instead of being like, oh, well, it's getting pretty scary, so I guess I better change course.
Well, I'll also say this, because one of the things that we do now as part of our business is we take people sailing pretty regularly to different destinations around the world. And I actually like to play this game with people that are on board. Having learned this lesson myself the hard way, I'll have them look at where we're going, and we look at the charts and everything, and they set the autopilot, and we're navigating towards a specific point or a specific island or past a certain buoy, and then I have them set the autopilot, and then I have them hang out at the helm, and I'm like, just sit here and watch this. And invariably, as we get closer and closer to things, they're like, hey, should we adjust course? And I'm like, nope, let's just play a game and trust it. And they're like, okay, and they just kind of keep looking over at me every 30 seconds or so, and their palms are starting to sweat, and I'm like, just hang tight. And I just make them sweat, and I have fun doing it. And invariably, we do not crash. We go right past where we wanted to go. We arrive where we wanted to be. But I just think it's a hard lesson to learn intellectually, but when you live it and you're on a boat and you actually watch it happen, you're like, okay, I get it. And so, it's one of those things. And in life, yeah, like Emily is saying, so many times we'll get close to what we want and we get scared, and we find a way to change course and not actually go where we want to go, or not do the thing that we really love, or not accomplish the thing that we've decided upon. It's a weird phenomenon.
I think for me, maybe a relatable example is when Eric and I were engaged, and my family was living in Germany, and they came back to the U.S. for the wedding, and it was all fun. And then they arrived, and suddenly we were doing like the actual wedding plans in earnest, and there was stress, and they were like worried about money and like all these like different concerns. And Eric was visiting his family in the DC area, and we talked one night, and I was like, what if, I really like my role in my family, like it's pretty clear, and what if we just keep dating? Like, what if we just like keep dating and we don't have to go through all this hassle. And he was like, I'm going to be there in a couple of days. It's going to be fine. We're getting married, you know. And I'm so glad we did. But it was just like, oh, this is going to change everything. All the relationships are going to adjust. And it was going really smoothly before, and now this is going to be different, and it's going to be hard. And it was just all in my face. And I was like, what if we don't get married? He's like, no, we're getting married. Okay.
I think those are such cool examples, and thank you for sharing them with us. And as you were talking, I picked up something that Emily, you mentioned before about pushing back on fear, and when you know that you're going for something that you really truly want, and at the same time, I noticed too in your stories that it seemed like you either needed to make that mistake or have somebody next to you to be that navigator to help you to understand that just keep pushing through, just keep going. We're not gonna crash. And what are your thoughts on that? On both pushing back the fear and having either a guide, a navigator to help you see that you just need to keep going on this path?
It's a great question. I'll say this. I think we all need guides, and we all have the ability to become guides. I think we all need coaches, and we have the ability to become coaches. And Emily and I coach some people, and we have our own coaches. And so I think it's something that there are areas where we are confident, where we have expertise, and we can be guides there. And there are areas where we're doing new things, and we need encouragement, or we need assistance or reassurance. And right now, one of the things, Emily and I were looking at purchasing a couple of businesses, and we have never done this before. We're feeling very uncertain, very vulnerable. And so we reached out to people that we trust and got connected with somebody that is essentially guiding us through this process. And we just are so grateful, so grateful. You know, we get on the phone with him. I need to send him a check today, as a matter of fact, because, you know, he's taking such good care of us. Anyway, I know that I know how appreciative I am when I have that person next to me that's saying, you're going to be okay. You're doing great, and you're on course, and that it keeps me from chickening out.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
It's really easy to chicken out without that.
I think that's part of it. I think part of it is also recognizing that pattern. Like once we recognize that pattern, we didn't always have to have somebody tell us, no, keep going forward. We would say like, oh, I'm feeling worried, but I'm going to keep going anyway because I know this pattern. This is the part where I will always get worried because it's right before I arrive at my, at my destination. So part of it is experience, right? And when we were just getting married, we didn't know that was the pattern yet. And
right.
And when we did that on the sailings, like we didn't know, but we learned it. We figured out the pattern after we wrote the book about our sailing trip. And so now we recognize it. And sometimes we'll then strategically, like Eric said, bring a guide in place, especially when we're leveling up and doing something totally new for us. But sometimes we can just rely on our experience, be like, oh, this is the pattern. And then even as we brought this guide in and you say, like, we're vulnerable, we're exposed in a new area, we also feel really peaceful. So
yeah, it's an interesting juxtaposition of sort of anxious nervousness and peace. And I actually think it's very healthy to spend time in both of these places, and the proportion that each person spends there is going to be individual. When Emily and I speak and teach, one of the things that we talk about is navigating out of the harbor, and that's part of the framework that we teach. And navigating out of the harbor basically means that you actually have to you have to kind of break ties with the thing that you're doing, and you go out and you do something new. You go out to the edge of your comfort zone. You've left the dock, and then you go out, and you go out as far as you start to,
get squirmy,
kind of want to pee your pants a little bit, and then you turn around and you go right back to your comfort zone, and you sort of take some time to rest and just recover a little bit. Then when you're ready, you do it again, and this time you go to where you were before and you wanted to pee your pants, and then you go a little bit further because you have a bigger area of confidence, and you go out further. And in this process, you just repeat it over and over again And each time you're expanding your comfort zone. And so you're pushing into fear, you're pushing past fear, but not too much. Because if we go too hard, too fast, it can be really discouraging and it can backfire, and it actually undermines our confidence because we don't do it successfully, and so I think it's important to have these incremental forays into the unknown, to that scary territory, and then go back and let yourself be reassured, let yourself be comforted. And I found that it's the most sustainable way to steadily and consistently increase your confidence in whatever area you're trying to do. Obviously, we did it in sailing. Emily and I did it when we got married, and we sort of, we didn't just jump deep into marriage. We kind of worked up to it through meeting and dating and all that sort of stuff, and that's and then engagement and multiple engagements, which we won't get into all that, but we're big believers in doing things gradually, steadily, gradually, and then when you do it that way, the whole Atomic Habits 1% thing, man, things can grow really fast. It feels slow, but they grow real fast.
Can get exponential. Justin and Moffat, have you guys ever heard there's no growth in the comfort zone?
Yeah, absolutely.
You ever heard that phrase? Yeah. I heard that a lot too. Before we lived on the sailboat, I was like every day getting like, do something that scares you every day, and like all these like growth mindset kind of quotes. And I think it's so important to get out of your comfort zone. And one of the things that I have found through going out of my comfort zone repeatedly is that there actually can be some growth in the comfort zone when you do this exercise of coming back to where you do feel safe and where you can rest, to kind of reflect on, like, what did I just do? How did I feel about that? What am I going to do next time to go a little farther? Because when you're always like strung out on the edge of your comfort zone, it can be hard to think clearly, think strategically, and it's nice to be able to come back and kind of give yourself a little success feedback, like, look what I just did. I just went farther than I've ever been before. And obviously we know the common metaphor of, building muscle. You do have to lift the weights, but you also have to rest between sets or take a rest day, And so that's what I kind of feel like. The comfort zone can be a trap if you stay there too long and you don't grow, but it can actually really help you accelerate your growth if you use it strategically.
When you set a goal, like the island, for example, that you guys were talking about, that you were sailing to, when maybe not adjust the goal, but adjust the path to get to your goal?
I guess I'll say this. I know that when I was doing sales and I was training and being trained, we'd talk a lot about SMART goals, and the T, if I'm not mistaken, in SMART goals is time bound. There's like, you have a deadline on it. And I do believe in setting a deadline and things like that, but
you love deadlines. You like short deadlines, like Steve Jobs deadlines.
Well, yes and no.
Intermediate goals, intermediate timelines.
It's the timeline that makes it. Are we going to make it? Because here's the thing that I truly believe about almost any goal is if you just pick it and just keep moving towards it steadily, it is inevitable that you will arrive. If you head in the correct direction long enough, you will get there. And I actually do see this from sailing, because sailboats don't move very fast. A typical speed on an average day is like 5 or 6 miles an hour. You can basically walk or fast walk alongside of a sailboat most of the time and be moving at the same speed. And there's this thing when you're sailing what's called downwind, meaning the wind is coming from behind you. The wind is imperceptible. All the action shots that you see of sailing are the pictures that are kind of like most interesting. People are sailing into the wind. And we're not going to get into the physics of sailing, but it's like that wind in your face kind of feeling. But there's this bizarre phenomena. When you're sailing downwind, you're actually traveling with the wind, and so everything feels dead. There's no movement of the air. Your boat is moving. It feels like it's moving very slowly because you don't feel anything happening around you. And so I was sailing in Mexico a couple of weeks ago with a group, and I said, look, we're going to turn the boat, we're going to be sailing downwind, and it's going to feel like all of a sudden we've just died in the water. And so they were ready for it, and we turned the boat, and it felt like everything died. And they're like, are we actually moving? I was like, yeah, if you look at the readout, we're moving at 5 knots. And they're like, okay. And I was like, if you want to be sure, drop something in the water and just watch it. And so,
like a rope or something.
Somebody throws like an orange peel, something about, somebody throws an orange peel over the side, and in like a snap, you realize how far behind you that orange peel is. And you don't realize how quickly you're making progress. But if you're kind of always wanting to have these indicators of progress and success, which are very helpful because they reassure you, those things are often absent, and they can make it feel like you're in a success desert, or that you're not actually making any progress. And so I guess I'll say this. I think that when is it time to adjust the goal is just
keep the goal, adjust the path.
Keep the goal or adjust the path. First of all, I would say just be patient. First of all, things often, Simon Sinek, if you guys, I don't know if you listen to him or follow him, he's like, look, if you want to get in shape and you go to the gym every day, when are you going to get in shape? That's going to be so different for every person. At what moment do you say, hey, I'm in shape? But if you go to the gym and work out every day, it is inevitable that you will, no matter who you are, eventually you will get in shape. And so I think maybe it's about adjusting the path, but I'm just saying, discovering what are the things that are actually moving you forward, and then just keep doing those consistently over perhaps an unreasonable amount of time.
It might feel unreasonable.
And it only feels unreasonable because you can't feel or sense your progress. And that's why I'm a big proponent of tracking progress.
Mm-hmm.
I write down how much I weigh every day. It never surprises. If I'm up, it's never a surprise. If I'm down, it's never a surprise. I write down how many words I write every day because I'm a writer. When I have a string of zeros, it's not a surprise that, I haven't been writing. It's like I see it. And I'm actually doing sales now, so to speak. Where I talk to people every day that want to go sailing with us, and I track all of that. And I know my conversion metrics. When I talk to X number of people, I have to talk to this many people before somebody signs up. I can always I guess I'll say this, I can always be honing and improving my plan, but it never has to feel arbitrary, I guess I'll say. And maybe this is the way to answer your question, because the question is, and the next is, when do you change the plan, and then when do you change the goal? Am I remembering it right?
Yep.
Okay, because I think very rarely do you want to change the goal. The only time you want to change the goal is if you say, well, I'm actually not interested in that anymore. I actually don't want to do that, and so I'm not going to move towards it anymore because it's no longer a priority, or it's no longer interesting or compelling to me. But I think you're constantly changing how you go about it, because you're constantly learning what's working and what's not. And I'm sort of reluctant to get into the weeds of our current business, because that's where my head is.
Talk about this in other terms, though, because one of the things we do, we have a weekly meeting, and in that meeting we always start with, what is awesome about right now? And I like what Eric is saying is when you're on a shifting path, and you maybe don't know exactly how you're going to get to your goal, and maybe it's because you're new and you don't trust yourself yet, or maybe it's because they just changed the technology on you for the 15th time this quarter, and you have to learn, how it works, or maybe the product changed, or, whatever it is. There are always things that are shifting, and that means you also have to make a strategic decision about how you're going to adjust to leverage it or to get the best advantage of it. And so gratitude can be used really strategically here, because it gives you the emotional stamina to keep moving forward. And maybe I'm going left, this time I'm moving forward, maybe I'm going right, but we have that practice all the time. It's scheduled weekly, what's awesome about right now, but whenever you start to feel discouraged, or maybe you get some information that it feels really draining, like that's going to be hard to overcome, you can always just drop right into gratitude, and you're like, look how much I've overcome already. I'm going to have a chance to learn something new. Maybe other people will think this is too hard for them to learn, and that gives me the competitive edge because I am going to be persistent and figure this out. There's all kind of ways you can approach it, but gratitude seems to come in all along the way at every time we have to. In sailing, it's called changing tack, or like adjusting, pivoting. And sometimes you're doing it because you're getting feedback, and you're like, oh, I now have data that this thing I've been trying doesn't work. Good for me. Now I'm not going to keep going that path anymore. And that's how, like Eric mentioned, he always knows his conversion numbers. But you don't know on the first day that you start tracking conversions, right? You have to get a big enough sample before you actually have that information. And so on those days, it's just like tracking your inputs. And then once you start getting more data, you're like, okay, now I can tell this is what's working or this is what's not working. And you can either pour the fuel on what's working, or you can redirect resources away from what's not working and try something else. So it's like a dynamic experience, right? It's an ongoing learning process. But I love what you said, Eric, about if you change your mind about the goal, that's when you're going to definitely switch directions. But if you're still interested and that's what you want to gain, then tracking inputs always gives the feeling of success, because you're like, I showed up, I did my part, and I'm going to wait for the harvest where I gather the information on what's working and what's not working. Yeah. And I'm going to be grateful along the way, and I can ask people, for guidance or coaching. I'm sure you have training programs. But we did it all along the way on the boat. We were constantly asking people, we're like, oh, we don't know how to do this, and they would give us input, and we'd try it, and then maybe we'd do it their way, and then maybe we'd adapt it to hone it a little more to our specific situation. And I think it's true whether it's in relationships, like, oh, it doesn't work when I lead with this question or this attitude. Let me try something else and get better and better at this.
I would add two other things, because I guess I feel like the norm is to be changing the plan. And what I mean by that is that if you're learning and you're always learning, you're going to be improving, honing, adapting, whether that's your sales pitch or how you implement, new technology and roll it out to your team. Each iteration, you're going to be learning and making improvement. I'll say this: there's a bit of a dance between staying the course and implementing changes, because I think if you're always implementing changes, it gets exhausting. Mm-hmm. And so I remember when I was doing sales, hey, we've refined our app and now this feature works this way, but then it would be buggy, or like when the process was changing daily or weekly, at a pace, it just became unsustainable, in some ways for me. And I'll also say that in our business, Emily and I present and speak at keynotes and things like that. And if we're always changing up our presentation, that takes a certain amount of energy to make those adjustments. Not that you can't do it, but you just have to recognize, oh, hey, there's sort of a draw on the energy bank to do this. But if you can sort of say, what's the pace or the cadence at which we want to implement improvements and changes, either it's, it can be, how you're navigating a boat, how you're navigating a conversation, how, your sales process. Just saying, I'm going to implement improvements and changes at these intervals. That might be hard to figure out, but just say, the pace at which you introduce or let change what you're learning come into what you're doing can help it be the difference between overwhelming and a relief. Because when you make improvements and things go better, that can feel like a relief, but those same improvements implemented too quickly can be overwhelming and kind of drown you. So
that's really true. That's like the startup culture. Like the whole tragedy is when they roll out changes faster than their people or their customers can adapt, and then the people just like lose interest.
Those are some long, rambly answers for you. Happy to bring it back to wherever you want.
Yeah, no. I like it though. Like I think it's real. it's real, and every person has a different tolerance for it. But yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I mean,
Back to you guys.
I agree with that. And, we last year, our company went through a lot of change, and we actually did get feedback from several individuals in the company that it was a little hard for them to keep up. And so we've tried to learn from that last year experience of we want to focus on the things that we did well last year and focus on stabilizing or continuing those good things rather than constantly making changes. So I think that's so true. We're basically out of time now. I want to thank you both so much for spending some time with us today. I feel like you have moved us forward, and there's so many nuggets, so many other things I wish I could ask you about, but we'll have to have you back on another time and go through some more of these things. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us. We always love to end by just asking what could go right, keeping that mindset.
And the other thing I'll say is that if anyone listening wants to listen to the book Knock, which was about my personal sales experience, I'll give you the link if you want to throw it into the show notes. But
Absolutely.
Just before we hopped on, I set up a promo code. So if people use the promo code NIGHT, as in white knight, they can get 50% off the book. And the book is really about how I faced my fears and tripled my income. And it was truly, doing sales was more life-changing for me than living on a sailboat. I'm glad I did both, but always happy to share that with people if it's helpful.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for that.
What's the website that people can go to learn more about both of you?
Yeah, so our website is theawesomefactory.nyc. Theawesomefactory.nyc is in New York City. And if you go /knock, that's the website for the book. That's the page for the book that I was just telling you about. And then we're also on Instagram and Facebook at The Awesome Factory NYC as well.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we'll have a link to all of that in the show notes. So make sure you reach out. Emily and Eric also do one-on-one coaching. So I'm sure if you guys are interested in that, you can set up a meeting with them. Thank you again. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and be with us.
Hey, it's our pleasure.
So just first of all, what made you want to come on this trip?
What did you say?
I've always wanted to try sailing, and it looked really fun. So we did it.
I think it was the perfect fit for what we were looking for. An opportunity to be on a boat and learn a little bit without any pressure, and also have kind of a vacation with it too.
And I'm just curious, what made you pull the trigger and say, yeah, I'm going to do it? Do you remember saying like, yeah, hey, let's call Eric and say yes?
I'm going to ask you that because I think I wanted to do it the second I learned about it.
Sometimes it takes a little bit for me to make a decision.
I think
so I was going back and forth, but Mary was like, this is perfect. And then she showed me like your blog and the book and told me more about the backstory. And I was like, okay, let's do it.
More about you and what your plans were for these type of trips. And also we looked at other options. And so we kind of knew what our choices were. And this was clearly the right one for us.
Awesome. Well, I'm flattered.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you guys came. So glad.
We are too.
Yeah.
It's been delightful having you guys on board. If you were to describe this trip in 3 words, each of you gets 3 words, what would you say?
I would say adventure, peace, and learning.
Exciting and restful.
And new.
Yeah.
Come
on. Yeah, exciting. I was like exciting and restful, both.
Exciting. And you said wrestle?
Restful.
Oh, okay.
Restful.
Oh, that's even better. That's even better than wrestle.
Wrestle.
Yeah.
Restful, exciting.
Yeah. And maybe like enlightening a little bit.
Tell me more about that. That's an unexpected but welcome word.
It's just, it was good to get away, good to remove like all the distractions, and also talk about like dreams and what's most important in life. And so like that blue water or blue sky meditation, that was enlightening for me.
Inspiring.
And inspiring, yeah.
Hey, it's Eric. If you want to go sailing with us this year, here's how that works. We have a few more trips planned for this year. There's 2 ways that you can come sailing with us. One is you can book by the cabin, and 2, you can just get a group of 6 to 10 people together. Let me know. We'll check our calendars, find a time that works, pick a place that you're excited about that I want to go to, and we'll make it happen. So reach out and let me know if you want to get a group together. If you want to book by the cabin, here's what you do. Go to theawesomefactory.nyc/sailing 2024, and you can get the rundown on what's happening, how it all works. And at the bottom, you can schedule a time to chat with me. I'll answer all your other questions and see if we can find a trip that's a match for you. So if you want to get out on the water, go sailing somewhere fun this year, would love to join you there. Thanks so much.